This piece is an alternate direction that we explored early in the process, where we wanted to really have the toon-styled lines defining the exterior of the character as an alternate reality, possibly spider sense. As we create each animatic, we replace out the shots that are originally 2D drawings with preliminary animation, and then finally with the final footage. Sometimes during the process, we feel like we need to amuse ourselves.
Okay, now you're definitely not getting an apology.
The video that you're about to see is the original audition piece that was created by Mainframe to help land the Spider-Man contract.
Got it. Moving on.
I'm Spider-Man.
That was fun.
This'll look cool on DVD.
Well, we don't have a choice now, do we?
Sorry.
The preliminary or rough animation is created in order to help the animators make sure that they've got the shot staged correctly, that performances are working, and it also allows them to solve all of these problems before they invest in the very expensive final render, which takes a lot of computer time.
Some people spend their whole lives trying to figure out who they are. But for me, it's about keeping it a secret.
Ever wonder what my life is like?
Hands in the air!
Hello? Good guy, saved your butt!
On the ground now!
My life is complicated.
There's a party tonight at the Sigmas. Want to come? How about if I come late? He's not coming.
Some people actually have social lives. Maybe you ought to try it one day.
Why not just go to a party like everyone else? Just because I'm not like everyone else?
Where were you when we had an energy crisis? It's lights out time, Static Man.
Spandex? Ha! You might want to rethink that.
This is so not spandex!
Harry, run!
Why are you helping me?
Thanks for letting me do that.
Not a problem. I bet the X-Men get to go to parties.
Hi, I'm John Digweed.
Hello, I'm Nick Muir.
I'm a DJ.
I'm a musician and programmer.
Welcome to our studio. For the last 6 months, we've been in here working on the music for the new animated version of Spider-Man.
We have an emergency.
I've always been very fascinated with films and the soundtracks that go with them. Nick and myself are very lucky that the first record we ever made was used in the film Trainspotting, which was a great buzz for both of us. With my DJing, I get to travel all over the world, but mostly America since '94. Through that, I've made many contacts, and through my profile growing in the States, people were aware of the music that we were making, and the Spider-Man project came about. I met up with Rick Unger and the composer Will Anderson. Everyone seemed to gel, it worked well, and you know, that was 6-7 months ago.
Yeah, it wasn't really a grand scheme of ours to get involved in film soundtracks, but as John says, the fact that you were over in Los Angeles and met a few people and they suggested that you might like to get involved in film somewhere along the line, and then I remember you came to me and said, well, let's have a go at doing this project.
I think the thing that both Nick and myself have noticed about this new version of Spider-Man is the way that it's shot and the animation. You know, there's a lot of depth to it. It's a bit darker and grittier, yet you still got the one-liners, the classic one-liners from Spider-Man coming out. Musically, it's been great to kind of put what we do alongside that and marry them together. And I think, you know, the combination of, you know, kind of electronic music with this cutting-edge animation just seems to work so well.
One of the things that struck us was that it was so atmospheric. The lighting of the production is superb, and the visual effects, it's a real visual feast, and very creative and very imaginative, and that's what we like in our music making. A lot of the episodes have, not all of them, because they explore different atmospheres, but a lot of them have a real explosive, high energy quality to them, and we like powerful music. That's how we like the music to be. So the idea that you've got real explosive energy within the production, you can mirror that in the way that you're making the music. That's been a real inspiration.
even though there's 5,000 miles and 8 hours time difference between us and LA, we've been able to work very quickly with Will Anderson and the producers and directors, because there's an FTP site which allows us to retrieve, you know, the music and the video, and also put up the music that we've been working on and get instant feedback.
Any music to picture we'd done before had been done using video and syncing the video to the computer with time code. But this time around, we were able to import files into the computer. So we had a readout of the cartoon as we were writing the music, and it meant that we could write the music really, really tight to picture. And that in itself makes you write music slightly different way, because you want to reflect what's happening in the action in the music.
Since the Spider-Man feature film came out, it's kind of raised, you know, Spider-Man's probably the #1 action hero, and I think, you know, this animated series, you know, just kind of takes it off at a different slant, but it's still going to be a huge hit, you know, across all ages. I think everyone's, you know, loves the hero. I think someone like Spider-Man, you know, a lot of people can relate to him, you know, a little bit. You know, there's something human in there as well.
Good. I seem to have your undivided attention. It's not too late to turn this thing around, is it, Dr. Connors?
We tended to stop short of being totally triumphant with the music, because there's a slight doubt in his mind that about his status as a superhero, and that lends itself to the atmosphere and puts a curve on things, which we were able to pick up.
Being involved in the Spider-Man project has been a huge undertaking. It's been probably the biggest challenge of our careers, as well as probably one of the most rewarding as well. The whole team has made us, you know, feel like we're part of a big family, and, you know, it's been really helpful to us, you know, having people like Will's, you know, guided us along, helped us with the spotting notes, really given us an insight in, you know, how this whole industry works.
And everybody's been communicating with each other really well. Aldu, who's the director, and Grace, who's the studio manager on the project. Everybody's kept us right up to date with what's going on, and we've got all the materials we needed to do the work on time really quickly, and everybody's functioned really well together, despite the fact that there's been 5,000 miles between us and the rest of the team. It hasn't felt like that for 1 second, so that's been great.
And it's been fantastic to work with such a professional, you know, bunch of people.
Yeah, the sharp end of the business.
Yeah.
It was good.
So, thank you.
Wait a sec. If you're so hot on this girl, how come we haven't met her? You embarrassed of us or something?
That's what it is. We're not good enough for her.
Well, that's true, you're not. But that's not the reason.
We always start, the biggest basis for us is the read. So the dialogue read is key. From the boards, we'll listen to the dialogue that we'll get from the directors. From that, we'll go into grin, and ultimately we try to tell all the animators is loop the dialogue, close your eyes, listen to it. So what I've done here is actually loaded in the dialogue for the specific section that we're going to use. I'm just going to play it quickly for you.
Sorry I bothered you.
Now from this, the big thing that we tell them is this should invoke a response from you. It's not a flat read. Now you can see that MJ's going, I'm sorry I bothered you. Without looking at the storyboards and just hearing the audio, I can tell that she's obviously feeling empathy. She's very sad for this, and I naturally want to drop my shoulders and bow my head. I'm feeling meek, and I want forgiveness from this. Once we've got all our shapes defined, we're getting, if you look at the bottom here, what we're dealing with is an F-curve window. Now these are default shapes. We suggest to our animators that you don't actually use these. These are essentially a match from what we get from our TD department and our software department, who set up the shapes. Now looking through sort of our S shape here, I'm like, well, I know that she's gonna come through this and she's gonna need a little more pursed mouth. So if you notice in the F-curves, as I'm adjusting the sliders, I can adjust my default shape to what I'm getting. Next thing you'll do, we'll go through and drop in a jaw pass. Once we do the jaw, we'll go in next into corners of the mouth, happy, sad, to give us the expression through the mouth. The last pass that we do is eyes. You get the mouth shape right, people don't look at it. You get the mouth shape wrong, they can't look anywhere else. So the biggest thing we do is make sure the mouth's working. A lot of newer animators get locked into the standpoint that you gotta hit every phone in. But if you actually watch people, you realize that our mouth actually doesn't move a whole heck of a lot. There's some slight animation on the brows, which is actually a key point that a lot of animators take over the top. We get a lot of Elvis eyebrows. Brows should never float. With character animation as well, it is pose to pose. Now, if we come to our bottom window here, for example, I'm gonna grab my jaw curve. Up to the right, you'll see the jaw. I can add more jaw into MJ. So one way to do it here, or I can actually go through and individually move points on this line. So what I've done here is I've actually made MJ's jaw come a lot closer to her mouth.
Sorry I bothered you.
So you can see I've actually dampened the jaw.
Bothered you.
And there's also a little bit of sardonic and side roll jaw that's happening over here.
Sorry I bothered you.
Again, layer upon layer, everything's affecting each other.
Wanna grab lunch? I got a serious pastrami Jones working.
Okay, I know that look. Extra lean, on sourdough, hold the mustard.
And here I thought you weren't paying attention.
I may find out that I need a little more of upturn in MJ's lips. We need her eyes to pop a little more. I need a little more range in her brows. From that, what I can do is actually go to our technical department and say, look, this is what we need. They can provide me with the answers either based on the limitations of the model, that we may not be able to do that, or we can. One of the biggest changes that we've gone into is structure keys for the character. So if you look up to the right here, you'll see that we actually have poses. Now these are a set of defined shapes for Mary Jane, where there she is sad. This is the extreme positions that we're going to push the brows. Now that doesn't mean that we can't give you a little more, or we can't give the character a little more, but this is the range, saying, you know what, for a maximum, this is how MJ looks throughout the comics, throughout her history.
Every time anyone anywhere asks you to do anything, you're like unavailable.
Not always.
Okay. Hey, Pete, there's a party tonight at the Sigmas. Want to come?
It's critical that we realize when we're in Grin, A, it is animation. It's not some mystical, magical little program that's going to do wonders for us. It still needs that creativity and input from the animator. It needs that whole creative process.
So I begged the Bugle to give me an actual job, not just the freelance stuff.
What'd they say?
They told me McDonald's is hiring all shifts.
Dude, all the fries you can eat. You don't even need to supersize.
So this is the hardware test before we go to final rendering. What the low res allows us to do is take a look at if we're getting the shapes through in Grin. So it's a chance to look at the Grin file on the character from the specified camera angle in motion. It is a dress rehearsal. And if the rehearsal is successful, we go to final rendering.
But you were the one who made me feel like I was more than I ever thought I could be.
MJ, I just can't do this.
I'm sorry I bothered you.
Pre-production, the choice was to not actually motion capture much at all. The choice was to actually keyframe the show and then add some motion capture characters in the background. And then when the show started coming in, the idea to keyframe Spider-Man definitely stuck. That was an aesthetic choice and it really works well for the show. But we decided that it was much more production friendly and for the aesthetic look to actually motion capture as much of the other characters as we could. On the school campus with the guys walking around with their books, lots of those we'll just capture and reuse. And then with the primary characters, any time that you get Mary Jane and Harry and Peter in Harry's apartment or around the drip den, all of those instances where they're being human characters will motion capture as well.
Keyframe animation is what Mainframe prides themselves on. Each animator manually manipulates the characters through rotations of bones, similar to what traditional animation is, whereas the motion capture is we capture a human's movement and apply it to the character.
Motion capture will not give you any subtlety in terms of the details. What it will give you is the broad stroke. So we'll take the characters, we'll get them moving around in the right time, in the right place, and then feed it to the guys so they can make it work.
Once the animator gets the motion capture, they have the job of integrating the keyframe character, which is Spider-Man in this case, to work with the same movements. And that can be a tricky job because generally if you're doing a purely keyframe sequence, you control the timing of both characters, whereas this one, you're working with timing that already pre-exists.
Another interesting note is that often what we'll do is capture Spider-Man in the motion capture studio as what we define as negative space. And what that means is that we actually will place somebody in the capture volume to act as Spider-Man, and then the other actor working to Spider-Man will have somebody to work off.
It's very interesting to watch a show that is a combination of motion capture and keyframe, and the Spider-Man series is a great example of it really working well together.
Do you think we'll work like this again in the future?
I think we're living in the future.
I've got something very hot and juicy for you. If you're interested.
Hot and juicy?
One of the really cool things about animating on Spider-Man, I think, is that the characters are complex, that their relationships are complex, and of course, character animators love to get into characters that have something going on behind what you see. So it's a big part of that is to discuss that and find out where the character's coming from. And then the diversity of the characters, like in the female characters that you've animated, they range from really nasty villains to
people who have crushes on the major characters, and there's love triangles, and and everybody's got personal trials that they're going through. He's lost his dad, so there's a lot of character you can bring out.
Well, we start with the boards, of course, and where the vision is the blueprint for the vision there, and trying to determine the best way that we can bring across the emotions that the characters are feeling. So first, deciphering what is the main emotion that the character's feeling, and why are they feeling? What's the backstory? So we got to start there to know how it fits into the creator's story. And
Scaly, know where I can get a little tail?
With action sequences, they're fairly complicated. If there's a lot of interaction, a lot of changing of center of gravity. Usually with Spider-Man, since he's so flexible, so extreme, he does a lot of things like handsprings and grabbing poles and swinging from webs. So the center of gravity seems to change a lot.
Spider-Man's he's a kind of a dream for an action animator to work on, because he goes to extremes, and of course that's what animation is about, is hitting extremes. So the fact that he's not expected to be human, he's expected to be superhuman, gives these guys license to really push things.
And it is a cartoon, so you get away with things. I mean, you push them, you can snap them, you stretch them to the extreme. Physics and inertia are important, but you can get away with a lot of things like really quick movements, really hard landings.
Seriously, ow!
A single shot could take as much as a week to a week and a half. We've had up to, whereas other shots might be as simple as you get 3 or 4 shots done in a day. So it's really a massive range. But for the complex shots, the key is to start with the basic blocking.
Then you definitely use broad strokes, and you do something we call a Gumby animation, with this like stick people kind of walking, very stiff animation to get the major movements down.
Then we make sure it's working for the camera. We make sure it's working in the sequence. There's no point working in the finer details of the shot if we find out that the general gist of it is wrong. So we try and work it up in stages, because otherwise animators can invest a lot of time and have it just thrown out the window.
NYPD's gonna be pursuing you. You won't get to the mayor.
How'd you track me?
You have a thing for 30mm carbine tracers.
The voice acting determines the quality of the performance that the animator is going to be able to give you, it's a lot of it comes from us. If the shot is a talking head, a close-up of a person, you don't animate the whole body. You just start with the sound file, and you do the lip syncing and the expression on the eyebrows, and then phone it in from the suite, which is over there, into this room, which is the Avid, and then the director or the supervisor will answer, and they'll take a test, which I don't know how to do because I don't work in here.
Ready. Go! Sometimes an animator will send you something that is almost bang on from the beginning. Other times, you might need to massage it quite a bit, because different animators have different styles. It's like an actor bringing you, how about like this, and then maybe something you never thought about, and you help just shape that, because sometimes it might be wonderful animation, but it's just not quite right for the moment. So those little massages until it gets and fits, and of course playing it in the context of the scene, then you really get to see is it working, and working it up like that through 2 or 3 tests till the performance is there.
So, what's your deal? Bit by a radioactive light bulb?
We'll get them to come in. We'll actually just go through it on the Avid, and it's really handy that we can be right here in no time, seeing how it fits into the cut. We can just, we call it scrub through the shot, basically just going through kind of frame by frame to diagnose the places that are working, the places that need work.
Just let him kind of look from arm to arm, just kind of like that before he finally breaks them free.
A lot of the cuts are really quick. I mean, you'll have, less than a second of a cut of a shot, and you don't really have a lot of time to see the transition between poses. So hitting a strong pose is probably one of the most important things in an action sequence.
Cute trick. Where were you when we had an energy crisis?
After we get it approved, the lighting starts, and it's much like lighting in the real world, except for the computer can do impossible things. We can tell a light not to affect a certain scene object or a certain character or a certain part of a character. So you can do kind of impossible things as well as, but the major theories are the same as film. And at that point, that's when we start doing higher res still images just to show the Avid where the major light will be coming from. It can take a while with a complex scene to get it lit properly. A high-res image of a more complex scene might take 10 minutes a frame, up to, I think, 30 minutes is our sort of limit that we give things.
Okay, Spider-Man, time to play hero.
I hate when that happens.
Job to pull together everybody that was involved in getting the series going when we first got it. One of the things about the series was the unique look that we were required to achieve and the technical problems that we had with that.
The biggest thing you'll see on screen that we did here at Mainframe was the cartoon look of the series. From the way the characters are shaded, which is how they're painted, the two-tone look, to the ink lines that are drawn around them to make them look like a comic book.
We were able to compress what was normally a three-dimensional world and give it a real flat 2D space.
Comic books are good for reference as a starting point. There's certain things that work well in a still frame that really don't work that well when the characters are moving. A lot of ink detail in the darker areas of the image doesn't translate well into motion.
In our first test of this, we had nothing but black contours, and with that, we found we were getting everything looking too muddy.
As you get farther back, it's going to be noisier.
At this stage here, we have contours that match the tone of the objects that they're applied to.
So this example of Mary Jane, you can see that on her face versus her hair versus her lips versus her clothing, there are different colors for the contour lines. And one thing you have to be careful about in these situations is that where the two different models intersect, because of the different colors of the contours, it can flicker because it's not sure which color to use.
Especially getting more complicated organic shapes, things start swimming all over, you get very distracted.
We had about 3 months to develop the Spider-Man model and test him and make sure that everything with Spider-Man would work. When you have 5 lines of production of Spider-Man going at the same time, that character is distributed amongst about 50 plus animators. You'd better be working or else you've got 50 problems.
So one thing you might find you're doing more is rotating the shoulder bones more than you might normally for some characters. Just an X.
Early in the game, we needed an animator to test our model Spider-Man, so I went straight to Clayton Ryan and said, "Clayton, what are you doing?" And Clayton said, "Nothing." And I said, "You want to work on Spider-Man?" Clayton just grabbed his things and left straight to the Avid. started to work on a number of shots.
I mean, early on, we were experimenting with Spider-Man galloping up a wall like a horse or something like that on all fours, just to make him go super fast, rounding corners on all fours, using his web line in new and innovative ways, like throwing it out from his wrist and just kind of spinning it like an actual spider would, building a web.
We had to develop a new kind of crawl for Spider-Man because we had to throw out the knee to the side, or else he would have intersected with the building. I love this crawl. We wanted to push the model to an extreme pose, and I love it.
Spider-Man got very compartmentalized as far as animation went because technically it was a very challenging series. Definitely more acrobatics and action than we've done as a company in the past.
One problem with CGI is the more elements you add to a scene, the heavier the scene gets for an animator to use. And one of the requirements that Sony had for us was to populate the city of New York. And if we couldn't populate the city, we wouldn't get the series. So we had to come up with an idea to create render-friendly, multiple-person sets.
These guys are basically the catch-all for when these don't hold up.
Yes.
Right. I mean, they're not. You can't. But you can't populate a set with those guys.
No, that's the other thing. I don't want to have a set with 20 of these in.
One of our technical directors, Jason Osipa, basically took these generic people and ripped their skeleton straight out of their body and made them these walking shells, and we used them in the background.
We built quite a few lower resolution characters that we could use that would be as light as possible to throw in as many as possible into the streets of New York. We built traffic patterns for cabs, cars, and we saved off as much of this as possible continually throughout the series to try and make it easier for the next show that came into production to use the same resources, so we weren't continually reinventing the wheel, which sometimes happens more often than not.
Spider-Man, that was a slightly different nut to crack because of the requirements to make it look like more of a 2D flattened stylized image, so the lighting we had approached differently. We had different shaders, or the shader called the Uber shader, which we developed here to help bring out just a two-tone look. That's a lot different way of dealing with things than what we had done before.
We were testing multiple lighting scenarios, day and night, realizing that once we eliminated lights, we got a better look, and we ended up with usually 2 sets of lights instead of the normal requirements of 3 or more.
A typical show isn't quite as intensive as the Spider-Man show was. Pretty much everything you'd see on the screen was written in-house. We wrote everything to do with the look of the characters, how they're shaded, how the ink lines are drawn around them, the actual geometry of the characters themselves. The software to do that was developed in-house.
In the pre-production early phase, we dealt with software a lot to deal with more of the management of the shaders and how we can get these thrown onto all the different materials for all the different characters, and how we can edit them quickly without going into each shader every time to open everyone up, which I had to do at the beginning, which is kind of crazy, going to 300 shaders and clicking a bunch of little switches for each one, things of that nature, trying to make things more efficient for just the whole production process.
But in this situation, because the sets and the characters were being reused so often, it was quite a challenge to create something that was actually reusable in many different scenarios, and still have that the contrast between the character and the backgrounds.
Well, Spider-Man was basically an extremely difficult model to work with. Typically with television, we don't have to worry so much about how the muscles are properly moving because you can cheat it a little bit. Spider-Man, because they want actual geometry for muscle tone, we had to make sure that the muscles do deform properly to the bones. Every point that you see on each intersection, they have to be mathematically calculated in percentages as to which bone it'll rotate with, it'll deform with. And in dealing with the textures, we basically had to localize different geometry within the body. So we actually had to hand paint the webs on the geometry. And then in certain areas, I guess we'd have to create little highlights to emphasize the muscles.
Traditionally in mainframe, we've been working on
shows that have that 3D look, and Spider-Man is our first full-scale production that's in 2D. And so some of the modeling methodology had to change. This would be pretty much the final look of some of our other previous productions. And with our shader on, the difference is night and day. This is Mary Jane here with our Ubermatte shader. And what it does is it creates a plateau of the diffuse so that you have two separate colors. And also, we have the contour shader on. So it's definitely got the tuned look.
One thing we also have to be very careful of on this show that we found out early on is we can't build characters the way we do for normal three-dimensional shows. Normally, you want to build something with nice, soft curves because that's the way people look. But in the case of this show, because the software that draws the ink lines is more sensitive to sharp angles than it is to gentle angles, we had to chisel a lot of the characters.
So what we had to do, for instance, with Mary Jane here, is to create the lines that Sony wanted for her nose. We had to give more acute angles for the nose, and in doing so, the contour will actually show up.
It's surprisingly difficult to tell a computer to draw something two-dimensional as opposed to three-dimensional.
What we do here is it's part of modeling, and we build shapes, and those shapes are used by animators. When I'm looking at Mary Jane here, this is before the voice. We take a look at the face and see what kind of characteristic or personality they would have. And for Mary Jane, we tried to create shapes that were attractive and cute, and so that even when she's angry, her face is still appealing. So what I do is I would grab the model that was built by the modeler, and we would set up the skeleton, neck bone, head bone, and inside we've got the eyes, the eye rig. We set up also, we fit each character with a set of teeth and a mouth bag, which is inside of the mouth. Since we're focusing on the grin head only, I remove the hair, the jewelry, the necklace and the earrings, and build the shapes, starting with the mouth. And then from the mouth, we work with the eyes and the eyebrow shapes. It pretty much includes everything that the face expresses.
For a second, seeing you behind the desk, you looked just like some of those photos of your father.
They give us an animated file that shows MJ going through all of her various different building block positions. Some of these get used sometimes, some not all of them, but they're all kind of in the palette that the artist can use. What I'm doing is I take a snapshot of the model in each of these different key poses and find out what's happening within the model, where the jaw is moving to perhaps, where the eyes are looking, what shape the face is in. And what I use that information for is plugging that into our in-house software called Grin. That's what the animators are going to use to sync up their character's performance to the dialogue. This is a completely customizable interface that changes from show to show. The animators have given us a lot of feedback on what kind of controls they want in this, and we put it all together. And so the end of my job is when I've set up a character like this, and I hand that off to the animators to use.
Is there something I did that I should know about? Stole your seat on the subway? Okay, now you're definitely not getting an apology. Ow.
Pete, a little help.
MJ, you see, Harry, like all great men, knows that actions speak louder than words.
Huh, is that so? In that case...
How you doing? Hey, at least let me enjoy it for a minute.
Well, Spider-Man has evolved in many different ways. See, Originally, I started writing him 1,000,000 years ago. But since then, I can't even count how many other writers have written the stories, how many other artists have drawn them. Now, as you can imagine, every time a new writer takes over the series, he will put his imprimatur on it. He'll give it his style. The artist will always give it their style. So over the years, he's changed slightly, but he's never deviated from the basic concept that he has to be a realistic, believable, empathetic, heroic character.
When we knew we were doing Spider-Man as a CG animated show, we were so excited because there were so many opportunities artistically to do something that had never been done before.
Adu's enthusiasm is very infectious. He has believed 1,000% in this project and has said from the very beginning, you guys aren't going to believe how it's going to look. And it's just fantastic, and we've done this, and the technology is unbelievable. And, you know, as an actor, you nod and you go, all right, can't wait to see it.
I'm not going back to the gulag.
Don't worry, I've got other plans.
You've changed, Spider-Man.
I love the artwork. I love the acting. I love all the subtle things, the way the body language, the way the characters react when they're being spoken to, the way they speak. It's just, to me, everything that an adventure animated series should be.
Never underestimate the superhero. Oops. That never happens.
Prior to Spider-Man, I actually had 2 other series that were also computer animated. Shows like Starship Troopers and Heavy Gear. Starship Troopers was a 40-episode series, did very, very well. It was actually nominated for an Emmy. It was a very realistic space drama set in far-flung galaxies where we fought bugs and people had great adventures. So, having worked in CG before, we knew we wanted to do something fresh, something different. And for us, trying to figure out what exactly that was going to be was a really dynamic process. We wanted something that would be very pleasing to the eye. We wanted something that was very colorful, that had opportunities for lighting that traditional 2D animation did not permit. We found that the closer we got to realism, the creepier the characters got. They're sort of like stuffed, flayed people or marionettes, you know, Thunderbirds are go. And the closer we got to perfecting it, the more off it felt. So it was a very natural choice to say, let's go somewhere else. Let's make a choice that's very graphic. Natural first choice was right in front of us. We've been looking at comic books, John Romita Jr.'s work, John Romita Sr., McFarlane. A number of great artists have supported the Spider-Man stories over the years, and for us, one of the first steps was just to put all that stuff in front of us and see what we reacted well to, see what we liked. For example, Todd McFarlane's design for the spider webs. Beautiful. I love that sort of knotted spaghetti look, and we tried to emulate that as we made choices for our series. Some of the work that Mark Bagley did with the youthful qualities of the character of Peter Parker, that gangly 17-year-old body, and immediately we knew that was a direction that we wanted to follow through on. We had a lot of good source material from the comics, and we wanted to build on that.
I must say I was a little concerned about it. I didn't have great expectations for it when I went into audition because there's a glut of comic cartoons on TV, and most of them just aren't that interesting. They're kind of two-dimensional, they're sort of cheaply produced, and so, you know, I auditioned because it's a job, but I had no idea that the technical elements would be of such a high level.
People have done versions of our characters that weren't too true to the original comic book perception of the characters. And one of the reasons was because we had no control. We just sort of gave it to somebody who bought the license fee. We were unsophisticated in such matters, and they did jobs that were less than admirable as far as the interpretation of our characters. We are so fortunate now. I really have made it a point not to butt in as long as we have the best possible people doing the project. I had such confidence in the people who were working on the show, and after seeing the show, they more than exceeded my confidence.
Spider-Man swallow the bait.
Sucked in the whole hero package like it was clean air, just like you predicted, Kingpin.
Poor little Spider-Man can't get no respect. What a rube.
When they were working on the feature film Spider-Man, the Sam Raimi film, we got the contract at Sony to develop an animated TV series as well. So I began working at that point with one of the creative executives at Sony. We started gathering art and reference, and at that point they brought in Brian Michael Bendis, who is a writer who works on Ultimate Spider-Man. Really nice guy, and he's really, really proud of what we've accomplished on the series. He did a pilot script. This pilot script was very edgy, it was very different, it was very much based on the work that he had been doing in his Marvel comic. And with that script, and with some of the art that I and my team were starting to develop, we shopped the show around, and MTV said, this is great, this is what we want. So in the fall of 2001, we shook hands with MTV and began in earnest.
Looking a little too good there, Peter.
After we made the decision to make it a computer animated show, we needed to find out which studio could work with us on the show. There are a number of studios all over the world that were very interested. Spider-Man's a very popular character, and we set up basically an open audition for studios. We wanted to know that the studio had the aesthetic ability and the technical ability to pull off what we wanted in our art direction. What we were looking for was this toon-styled line where the exterior perimeter of the character would have a line around it, and that line needed to be something that we, as storytellers, could control very carefully. We needed to be able to control the color of the line, we needed to control the line thickness, the line weight, so that as a character's hand came closer to camera or farther away, for example, it would not clot up and just become the line itself. It needed to look like an illustration. And that may sound easy, but it was actually a very difficult technological achievement to pull that off. And the studio that won the contract, hands down, was Mainframe, which works out of Vancouver, Canada. Mainframe is famous for doing Reboot, which was one of the first computer animated shows that ever was on the air. They have an extraordinary team up there. They have people who have been doing keyframe animation for CG for almost 10 years, and they've really protected their talent pool. And the subtlety of the performance and acting that we have in our series is in many ways a tribute to the skill of those animators that are working on the series up there.
And here I thought you weren't paying attention.
No, I pay plenty of attention.
You do?
So simultaneous to working with Mainframe on initial technological research and development issues, we started working on scripts and stories. We started to develop premises that were acceptable to our client MTV, as well as to Marvel, as well as to Sony. We hired writers and story editors who would polish these stories and develop them up. And as those stories started to define themselves, we were able to do more illustrations to support those stories. Who are these extra characters? Who's this bad guy? What does Electro look like? What can we do that is unlike anything that has been done before?
I've been reading a lot of Spider-Man comics since I've done this, because I have to talk about it all the time, you see. And it's great. It's a great dynamic to have a teenage character that's a superhero.
No, that's okay. Maybe you'd like to sit behind the desk. Just let me know. I certainly have nothing better to do in my own office.
Sorry, Mr. Jameson, I've got to go.
Parker, get back here. I'm not done throwing you out.
The writing process for a show like Spider-Man is very dynamic. There's a number of people that are involved. Primarily, our executive producer, Morgan Yandell.
They brought me in. I read a few of the scripts. I thought, yeah, I could have fun doing this. I hadn't been involved with animation before, but I came in and basically looked at a few of the scripts that had already been written, saw what was needed, started some new stories in development, and got things rocking and rolling.
Morgan has this extraordinary experience in television. He'd come off of shows like Law and Order, Nash Bridges, VIP, and he'd actually never done animation before. So for him, it was like a kid in a candy store. Oh, you mean I can do that? You know, I can actually have them fly through the buildings and, you know, crash through windows and so forth. This expanded his capacity as a storyteller. So he was thrilled. He had a lot of energy from the very beginning.
One of the first things they said to me was, if you can do it in live action, then don't bother doing it in animation. Meaning, we do things a lot, different isn't quite the word, but you can bend reality a little more than in live action. You don't have to adhere to some of the rules you do in live action.
He would participate with us at not only as a writer, but also he would come to the recordings, and he would join me later in the process to sit through and flip through storyboards and offer constructive comments on how to direct the shows and how to craft the storytelling.
The great thing today, both with Audu, the way he runs things, and using the internet, I would get probably about 15 emails every day with JPEG files showing me rough sketches. Here's 10 rough sketches of possible gadgets. And I say, well, I like these couple. Then they come back, here they are refined. Then here they are colors. Every step of the way, I really had input. I mean, it's not to take away anything from the creative people who do the creative job, but I at least could make sure when I thought of the story idea, or in conjunction with the writers, when we thought of stories and beat them out into outlines and wrote them as scripts, is this what we were picturing to tell that story?
MJ, deep down inside me, I'm afraid there's a big, boring nothing. I don't know what else I can tell you, except for the coolest secret stuff about me, which I can never share with you. Like this.
We also had to cast. We had to find voice actors who could bring our characters to life. We had over 200 actors audition for the key roles in our pilot episode. There were people from television, from film, from with extraordinary experience, and they were all very excited about the project, and very tough choice.
I did a couple episodes of the Justice League and other series, and I thought it's just a great discipline to use just your vocal inflection to try and make a character work. And so I've been auditioning for all sorts of stuff, done a lot of books on tape, Beverly Cleary's books I do, Henry Huggins and all those, and as Spider-Man came around, I auditioned for it and ended up getting it. I didn't even expect to get it, but it worked out real well.
Who are you, and what have you done with Harry Osborn?
If you keep acting like a jerk, I'm not gonna let you meet her tomorrow night. I thought I'd make dinner for the four of us.
You?
Cook?
Yeah.
Well, as in preparing food for human consumption by means of heat?
Just shut up and be ready at 7.
Neil Patrick Harris is so much fun to work with. He really knew who this character was, and he doesn't need much direction. He'll just sort of reach into himself, and he'll give it to you right on the first take.
So then you use the computer, you bring up Jane Perkins' face, you bring up Silver Sable's face, you merge the two, boom. Jane Perkins is Silver Sable.
Jane Perkins is Silver Sable.
But if she's been masquerading as the mayor's aide, she'd have had plenty of chances to kill him. She's after someone else.
Neil, thank you. You've been wonderful today.
You were really terrific.
Really? I thought that I totally screwed up that college dorm scene.
You'd never know.
I didn't think you'd show. I mean, it meant so much to me, and then I thought, why was I obsessing over whether or not you saw me?
Lisa has this extraordinary subtlety to her performance of MJ that I'm just really a big fan of. It was a very important role to cast. We needed to make sure we had somebody that had extraordinary capacity to control their instrument, in this case their voice, to create performances that would break your heart or thrill you. And at the same time, we needed a voice that was unique. We needed something that was unlike the voices you would typically hear in a television series, especially an animated series. And Lisa, being a singer, has this very personal quality to her voice. There's no one else quite like her.
Petey, I don't care if you go out with Indy.
How'd you know it's her?
It's written all over your face.
I-N-D-Y.
Hey, I broke up with you too. How come you never write on my face?
One of the great challenges to being a voice actor for animation is being in the moment. And the challenge is that you're really in a room with microphones in front of you, often other actors around you, a music stand in front of you with pages of script, and sometimes they're not the same pages that you received the night before and you actually studied and rehearsed. You're basically kind of reading live off of the page, but you've got to be able to imagine that you are falling off the side of a building, that you are swinging through the city, that you are about to be kissed by a man in a spandex suit who's dangling upside down from the side of a building. And that requires a lot of imagination. And then that translation process to actually make it live through your voice. It's a rare talent.
Hey, guys.
Hey, MJ.
Wow, is that Harry Osborn awake before 6 p.m.?
Yeah, what's up with that?
Sigma party tonight. You there?
There's a party?
Yeah, I'm there. You?
Oh, yeah, I'm definitely party deprived.
There's a party?
So then we have a radio play. This is the tool that allows the storyboard artist to proceed with creating a visual performance that's sometimes up to 2,000 to 2,500 panels that basically defines what the film will be. Anytime there's a change, anytime there's a transition in story, somebody moves, somebody reaches, picks something up, somebody speaks, somebody has a change in their motivation in a performance, it has to be drawn. It has to be created as a blueprint that the animators can then follow faithfully. Harry's bedroom and Peter's very small junior bedroom usually takes about 100 to 120 man days to create a storyboard. We then scan it into the computer and we create what's called an animatic, which is a black and white 2D video of what the whole cartoon will look like when it's finished. And at that point, the animators at Mainframe will take 2 to 3 weeks to kind of work in a very small group of 2 or 3 to sort of rough out the show. Then when they're ready, a larger animation team becomes available to them. Suddenly 10 to 12 people are working for them to take their rough animation and expand it out and give it life and to really kind of breathe a human side into it. There's always room for improvement. This is where we have faith that the people who follow us in our storytelling understand the big picture. They understand our goals for the tone and the mood for the piece. And often you'll find the animators are adding small moments, a blink, a lift of an eyebrow, that are so honest and they're so real that it blows you away when you get the footage back.
As thrilling as it is to see the action and the movement of the characters, it's even more thrilling to me to see the way these characters emote. They're cartoon characters. Somebody is sitting down at a keyboard and making their lips or nose or eyebrows move or whatever, and they do it, they emote. They're funny, they roll their eyes, they're sarcastic, they're sad, they're happy. That is fabulous, to be able to take these computer-generated images and bring them to life.
Don't you remember? You smiled at me. You cared. No one ever cared before.
No, it's not like you think.
You do care for me, don't you, Sally? Don't you?
During the process of animation, we receive work-in-progress tapes, 5 of them, where we have our 2D animatic mixed with a half-finished animation, mixed with a couple of shots that are actually completed or actually finished. And then we will give notes on those as we go and kind of steer the process. So the animation team at Mainframe would have 3 weeks for initial production and an additional 10 weeks for animation. When the animation is finished, it's then delivered back to Sony, where we will do an additional edit. We'll cut about a minute out of it by pulling a frame here, a frame there. What we'll often do is we'll go into other episodes, other shows. We'll pull establishing shots, reaction shots of characters. One of the cool things about the process is because it's in the computer, because it's digital, we're actually able to separate Peter Parker, or Spider-Man, from the background. And so we can take the character level off, put it on a different background, and it looks like an entirely different scene. Coming up from the crouch, that has to go there. So we edit the picture together, we lock it down, and when we have that picture locked to the point where we know that we don't want to change a frame, at that point it's ready for music. We send it to John Digweed, Nick Muir and Will Anderson, who are our composers for the series. They have then about a week, possibly 2 weeks if they're lucky, to score the entire 20 minutes. And it's mostly original stuff, in the sense that it's all original material. Sometimes they'll tap into a theme that was created for a certain character from another episode.
Oh, some of those, remember the shaker rattle stuff we had in the lizard show? Maybe, yeah, some stuff, jungle percussion.
Odd hobby.
So we have a locked picture, we have a score that matches it, we have also sound design, and we have Foley, and we have dialogue. It all comes together on the mix stage. And our process at the mix stage is exactly the same process that you would use in a feature film, where we are making choices about where the music is up, where the sound effects are up, echoing voices, creating special effects for monster voices, and we bring it all together, and we kind of put it all to bed. At that point, we then format the show, where we kind of put it into final form, pass it over to the network, and it'll be on the air very soon. It's a very exciting process. The other dynamic to it all is we do have 13 episodes. They're going simultaneously. It's an assembly line. One show starts on week 1. About a week later, maybe 2 weeks later, the next show starts. So while you've got one show commencing storyboards, you've got one that's in mid-storyboard review, you've got one that's going to be in animatic review, you have animation handout that's occurring the same week, and it's a scheduling nightmare to pull all this together so that everybody gets the time they need and that the machine is running smoothly. And vast sums of other people's money are involved, and you've got to get it right. If you do it right, they let you do it again.
Funny thing, when I first began the character, I've been asked so often, how did I feel? Did I ever expect that today there'd be major motion pictures and great television animated series and so forth? All I hoped was that somebody would buy the magazine and I could keep my job and I'd keep getting my salary. And I mean, in a million years, neither I nor anybody at the company could have thought that we'd be doing an interview for a DVD. We didn't know what a DVD was. We didn't have DVs. In fact, the reason my fingers are so stinted, we were always scratching things on the walls of caves in those days.
MJ!
Oh my God, Peter, you made it.
Covert mission ended early. You were really terrific.
Really? I thought that I totally screwed up that college dorm scene.
You'd never know.
I didn't think you'd show. I mean, it meant so much to me, and then I thought, why was I obsessing over whether or not you saw me?
You were terrific. You should be really proud of yourself. You blew away those Letterman people.
Thanks.
MJ, come on.
Oh, yeah. This is for you.
It's beautiful.